If you were to go into the past, you have no idea what the consequences can be.
Is it me?
Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at CinemaBlend, back for another DC video with my great friend Hannah Saulic. Hi Hannah, how are you?
Hi.
I'm fabulous. How are you, Sean?
I'm doing great. So we're here because you guys have probably by now seen the ending to the new movie, The Flash, and of course you have more questions than the movie has answers.
What's happening?
So we're going to try our best to address everything that happens, not just at the very end of the movie, but what happens in the end credit sequence as well too. We've been covering all the DC angles for all these different films, both The Flash and what's to come, including the James Gunn reboot. So make sure you keep it right here on CinemaBlend by hitting subscribe, turning on your notifications, going down into the comments, and following along with all of our analysis.
I need friends.
So let's talk about the ending first, because full transparency, we're recording this and I haven't seen the actual ending because the version of The Flash I saw, and we're in spoiler section here, ended right before you saw who was the Batman or Bruce Wayne getting out of the vehicle.
Yeah, it was an Uber.
When we saw it at CinemaCon, we were both like, okay, there's no way that they already cast the DCU's Batman that will be in The Brave and the Bold. Right. So what happens in the end of the movie? And then let's talk about what we think it means for the DCU.
All right, so everything that you saw up until the point where Barry says, who the fuck is that, essentially happens. He calls Bruce Wayne, he tells him that he's back and he's restored the timeline. Bruce congratulates him on his father getting acquitted. And then Bruce says, I'm pulling up to the curb right now. So you see the car pull up and the reporters all gather around the car and almost block him from view. Barry says, who the fuck is that? And then they cut back to George Clooney walking to him in a suit, dressed like Bruce Wayne, and coming up to Barry and essentially saying, hey Barry, good to see you, welcome back, kind of thing. And Barry says, you're not Bruce Wayne. And then George Clooney says, are you feeling all right? And then they cut back to Barry, and his tooth that had fallen out from the time he walked into the wall when he tried to phase without having his powers falls out, and he's now in a universe where George Clooney is still Bruce Wayne and Batman.
So I've been thinking about the possibility of George Clooney coming back in The Flash for a while, and I honest to God think it's the only way that you can end that movie and have it work, because it was originally supposed to be Keaton. Like, we've seen set photos where like they've filmed that sequence kind of sort of outside the courthouse, and like you even see the shot of like Sasha Calle as Supergirl in one of the trailers that's very clearly from that scene. And they had to reshoot it because ultimately, like, The Flash had to work with whatever Walter Hamada was setting up, and then also has to work with what James Gunn is doing. And what Walter Hamada was setting up was obviously Batgirl with Michael Keaton and Leslie Grace's Batgirl. So like having him as the Batman in that ending moment would make sense, but that has been scrapped. Warner Brothers understandably probably doesn't even want to go down that route or like give fans another reason to be like, you know, not excited about this movie or whatever.
Right.
And you can't bring Affleck back because same reasons.
Right.
Just a whole can of worms. And Bale wouldn't come back. You know, he has said that he's not going to come back without Nolan. So Clooney's really your only option unless you've already cast the DCU's Batman, which they haven't. They don't even have a script yet. But also, the whole Ezra Miller of it all, this, I think, gives them a way of saying, like, oh, no. Ezra Miller's Flash, if they want to, is off in George Clooney's universe now, and that's not our timeline. What do you think?
Right. No, I agree with that all, 100%. Because they could have done Val Kilmer also, but you also can't kind of do Val Kilmer. And it is, I want to point out too, in case people are watching this and made it this far and haven't seen it, it is Clooney now. Like, it is an aged Clooney. He's got the white sort of stubble beard sort of thing. So they're not trying to de-age or do anything. They're very clearly saying he has been Batman of this universe for however amount of time has passed.
James Gunn has also said that Batman, age-wise, like, I'm trying to explain why George Clooney is not the DCU's Batman.
Okay, gotcha.
Somebody on Twitter said, asking about Superman's age, and Gunn said, people are speculating about both ages. All I ever said was Superman was younger than in his 40s, and Batman might be a couple of years older than Superman. So it doesn't sound like the Batman of the Brave and the Bold and the DCU that they have planned is, I don't know how old George Clooney is, but he is, over 60 at this point?
He is. And listen, he looks amazing for being whatever age he is. If he wanted to be in The Brave and the Bold, I'm all for it.
Geriatric bat.
I think that's fantastic. However, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they had Keaton at the end of the movie, and then once they scrapped Batgirl, they had to reconfigure that ending. And kudos to them and to Clooney for putting that together at the last minute, I would assume, because there hasn't been that much time that's passed since Batgirl has been scrapped. And so the Muschiettis had to scramble and get someone to fit in to do that cameo that, you know, makes sense in the grand scheme of what the DC movies are to this point. I guess they could have just left it at the Ezra Miller line and just cut it there the way that we saw at CinemaCon. I think that's still an effective ending. It's saying to the audience that Ezra doesn't recognize who Bruce Wayne is, and it leaves it a little bit open. But
which is why I'm like, I feel like it's a cap on even Ezra Miller's version.
Okay. One of the reasons why I think it also works as well, too, is because this movie, in my opinion, is a real love letter to the entirety of the DC saga up to this point. And so this is a way for them to also just pay homage to Clooney and the work that he did, which, you know, he has no problem sort of poking fun at it. But this is a great way for him to come back and just sort of get a little bit of closure for his version of the character. I'm going to go on record as saying that I hope The Flash makes sequel money, but I'm not quite sure The Flash is going to make sequel money.
But even if they do, it's like, wouldn't they just take that and be like, okay, we should probably get a Flash project in chapter 1 of the DCU? Like, if they're truly letting James Gunn do what James Gunn wants to do, like...
No, I agree. And I think that they should almost use this, again, as closure to the versions of the characters that have existed up until this point. It's Ben's last turn. You know, it's theoretically looking like it could be Ezra's last turn. They're leaving him in this universe where Clooney is the existing Batman. So let's get to the last wrinkle then, which is one last piece of closure that has to be taken care of, which is the end credit sequence. So, Hannah, you haven't seen this yet either. I will vamp for you at this point and I'm going to try to remember it as best as I can, but I'll be paraphrasing a little bit. But the end credit sequence begins with Barry and Arthur Curry, played by Jason Momoa, coming out of a bar, and the two of them have clearly been drinking for a long time. And it's very clearly the block where Barry's apartment is. But Barry is explaining to Arthur Curry, like, what he had been doing. And he's like, you know, I was traveling through these different multiverses, and everywhere that I went, Batman looked different. You know, it looked like a different Bruce Wayne. He was a different guy. And then Arthur specifically says, but everywhere you went, I looked the same. And Barry's like, yes. So that line sets up a bridge that at least says Aquaman can exist in a universe, in any of the universes that we've seen so far to date. But in the Keaton universe, there's that moment where Barry...
He's a dog.
Yeah, he's a dog. Barry calls Arthur's father, and it turns out that he never met the Queen of Atlantis, and they never had Arthur.
I assume the end credit scene takes place in Clooney's universe, yes?
Yeah, I have to assume because that's where we left Ezra.
So maybe it's a way of explaining that Aquaman 2 is in Clooney's universe, or Aquaman 2 is in, if we're going by Batman, Affleck's universe, and they both look the same, so it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's almost way more confusing than just not addressing it, though.
Yeah.
So it makes me think if they put this scene together at the last minute to almost address why Arthur can look the same anywhere, it leads me to believe that they're also going to include some sort of scene, if they care this much, that at least closes that loop. Somehow.
Yeah. They're gonna, because... Okay.
And then Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will truly be...
the last.
Because you have to remember, like, these movies were supposed to come out at different times. I think Aquaman was supposed to come out before The Flash.
Yeah.
At one point. I don't remember exactly now, like, why they changed. And I know COVID screwed everything up, and then production schedule screwed everything up. And for some reason, Aquaman got punted back to December of this year. But for a continuity standpoint, that creates all sorts of headaches. That scenes like this might not make a ton of sense right now, but once we see how things end with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, that could truly be whatever it is. And I think James Gunn's saying that, like, no, Blue Beetle could definitely be part of our universe. I think that's lip service. Like, I think no matter how good that movie ends up being or bad being.
Well, I think he said he was like, it does nothing in Blue Beetle contradicts what they're doing in the DCU, which to me means there's no Snyderverse or other cameos to tell you that it's something that it's not. But yeah, that's very confusing.
Because now if you look at Shazam, Fury of the Gods, we saw Wonder Woman pop up in that one. But
so
she
Wonder Woman's
got
to be an Aquaman, don't you think?
Probably. Yeah,
and probably the reason that they can't say anything definitively and want to give that more vague ending to the Flash through this end credit scene and then also through just the ending is because if they do anything else, then like people aren't going to want to go see Aquaman if they're like, oh, this doesn't really matter.
It would be really great if they somehow managed to put together an end credit sequence at the very end of the Aquaman end credits that featured all the Justice League members.
That'd be cool.
Just a quick cameo that showed them riding off into the sunset, somehow.
We always talked about the Flash answering all these questions that we had in the beginning of the year, and it's like, no, we just now have the same amount but different questions.
Yeah, well, I will say that at least it has established the concept of the multiverse.
Yes.
And that when you land in different ones because you changed one thing or the other, that there are slight modifications. But, and truly, like, it's like the Back to the Future thing. Like when Marty comes back to his timeline, his father's cool now, because he punched Biff out, and everything else is sort of the same. So in this timeline, because Barry moved the tomatoes to the top shelf, his father's acquitted, but it tweaked a little bit of something else, and now he's got George Clooney as Batman. Doesn't mean he can't run back through and change it again, sort of thing, but it would require a whole scene and a sequence set up. So
Or it could
I think some of it's answered, but yeah. But really, these things fuel videos like we like to do, which is raising a lot of questions, trying to answer them, and then waiting for the next movie to come around.
I think I'm right. I'm gonna say that.
In which sense?
I don't think Clooney is the DCU's Batman. I think this is a way of saying, Ezra, you stay over there, and it's also a way of saying, hey, don't forget to spend money at Aquaman 2 later this year. We will end everything after we can no longer worry about needing to make money on these huge blockbusters that we already spent money on.
No, that all lines up. That lines up clearly. I would agree with that.
Aye, aye.
All right, well, we'll be back with some even more deeper dives into things. I've already got ideas for things that we just need to discuss, but curious to hear your guys' thoughts about what you think the ending means. Any theories for Aquaman 2? Anything else I'm forgetting, Sean? You usually wrap these up. This feels weird.
Well, no, I would love to hear people's theories about The Brave and the Bold specifically.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear what people think about the Clooney-ness of it all. And I want people who have heard that line in the Aquaman end credit sequence if they think that they translated it differently than the way that I have at this point. So head down in the comments below. Let us know how you feel about all the things that we discussed. Give us some ideas for future videos and keep it right here on CinemaBlend as Hannah and I continue to break down the craziness that is the DC universe.
So I thought there was there's a mid-credit sequence and a post-credit sequence.
There's a mid-credit sequence that is aimed specifically at you, by the way, because as you will remember, during the baby shower sequence, right, where all the babies are falling, there is also a dog that is falling, a rescue dog.
That's the best part of the movie.
The mid-credit sequence is the rescue dog falling in slow motion and reacting to Barry running around saving all the babies.
Oh my God. I need to
phenomenal.
See that immediately. Okay.
It's just a lengthy shot of the rescue dog
Sounds amazing.
falling.
Yep, that is specifically for me. Thanks, Andy.